All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Tuesday, January 28th, right here on All in Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns. I'm Tanner Carlson, and that is Jake Jimerson, and we have a fun episode for the people today. Going to give a football update, some injury news that occurred over the weekend, and the announcement of the Senior Bowl. We'll kind of give a description as to what the Senior Bowl has even become and how vital it is for players such as the likes of Byron Murphy and Trevondre Sweat to join the Senior Bowl, to participate in it, and to get their name out there sooner rather than later. Whereas the Senior Bowl, I think once upon a time, maybe kind of an afterthought, or maybe, a joke not taken as seriously as it is today. And what it's evolved into is pretty significant for draft prospects. And so we'll kind of break that down. And then also women's basketball coming upon a crucial stretch during their season, and how this stretch of games progresses over the next 2 to 3 weeks will probably determine the success of their season, not just in conference play, but beyond that, going into March Madness as well. So with all that being said, maybe a shorter episode for the people, but Jake and I, we always tend to say that, and then all of a sudden we're above 30 minutes. And so we have the capability, the gift of gab, if you will. Jake, how are you doing, my man?
Oh, good. Still just kind of pumped up from that Texas win over A&M. It's the only good thing I had on the weekend to cling to, because football sucked, at least as someone who wasn't going to be happy no matter who won the NFC championship game. And there was only one outcome from the AFC title game that could make me happy, and neither made me happy. So I got to cling to that win.
How's the office life with Kansas City winning?
It's just so much deserved arrogance that is tough to be around. Luckily my direct boss isn't like a lot of the others in the office that are very loud about it, to a point. But also there's a lot of people in there who just feel bad for me at this point, that I'm a Cowboys fan and that I'm suffering, and they know how miserable I am, to the point where it's like, it doesn't even seem fun for them to talk about football around me, because then I just go into being like, I can't wait till Jerry Jones is gone, which I think everyone knows what I mean when I say that.
By gone, we don't mean quit or retired. Yeah.
It's selling the team is one option. That'd be my favorite one personally. But yeah, it's just it's a sad football world. So if Texas lost A&M, it'd have been a very bad weekend. But luckily, my antics were able to push the team forward.
Yeah, and the men's took care of business, but the women's also taking care of business as well. And so want to dive into their upcoming schedule and what the rest of their season looks like on the women's side. Tomorrow's episode, just to give you a little preview, a little snippet, we'll probably primarily be talking about the men's basketball side of things in tomorrow's episode. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping to do. Take care of the Colton Vasek news. Underwent shoulder surgery with a torn labrum over the weekend, and played with a brace on that same shoulder. So if you remember seeing him padded up during the regular season, he had a brace on that shoulder. That's the shoulder he tore and played through, really, and then decided to get surgery in the offseason. He also suffered a back injury his true freshman year in 2023. So kind of an injury situation where he just hasn't been able to experience a fully healthy year as a Texas Longhorn, whether that be through the offseason, through the regular season, and back into the offseason. So this offseason will be solely dependent on him recovering from surgery and that torn labrum in that shoulder, and see how he can get back on track in a handful of months.
Yeah, maybe something we should have talk to Dr. Solis about at some point during the off season. Another note I wanted to bring up that I actually didn't put on the document, so I'll just bring it up now. Texas did have a defensive lineman who entered the transfer portal from Ohio State visit during the weekend. Was kind of a surprise visit. and that is defensive lineman Hero Kanu. I'm not sure I'm saying that last name right. Probably not. Kanu, maybe Kanu. That if he commits, I will look it up and figure out how. But he's a guy who doesn't have a ton of playing time at Ohio State. He has multiple years of eligibility left. Was like a high 4-star blue chip level guy, and would probably definitely at least crack the rotational unit for Texas next year. And obviously, we have talked about it. We expect 2 to 3 more defensive linemen. So just one to kind of keep tabs on. They are going after him. I know he's planning on visiting, I think A&M in Florida for some other visits, but that is one departure from the national championship teams that Texas is targeting for sure.
Yeah, and on the Colton Vasek, the torn labrum is, according to my extensive research on Google, which obviously provides me the correct sources to give you this news, 4 to 6 months is typically the recovery period for your average Joe, for me, if I suffered a torn labrum doing God knows what. So for a all-around athlete like a Colton Vasek, maybe a shorter period of time, maybe with the training staff, a shorter period of time. But in terms of regular human beings recovering from a torn labrum, we're looking at late July, early August at the latest. And so hopefully he's fully ready to go by the time Ohio State rolls around week 1.
Yeah, I mean, he showed some really good flashes towards the end of the season.
Someone you were excited about, Jake.
Yeah, especially that Ohio State game. And, he obviously fought through some painful injuries during the season and still was able to flash when on the field. It stinks losing him for spring ball and another, off season of conditioning and weights. But you do some conditioning and weights when you're rehabbing, depending the rehab. And hopefully, he's able to come back full force for fall camp and, more importantly, just stay healthy during the season, because that really cost him his freshman season. He's a guy who probably could have got on the field some as a freshman. And so hopefully he'll be able to stay healthy when he does come back, because he's a guy that, is part of what it makes this edge room arguably the best edge room in the country going into this next season. And so you definitely want him in the rotation.
Well, that's an extremely good point to make, is because just because you have talented starters, your rotation and depth is what makes you the best position group in the country at certain positions, and so that defensive end group for the University of Texas going into 2025 may very well have the best rotation of edge players going into the season. And he would be a big part of that to spell out an Ethan Burke or Colin Simmons, and maybe, I don't think he would, but maybe even getting starting type reps over a guy like Ethan Burke if he had a good enough offseason.
Yeah, he has the ability to, and at least be a designated pass rush package guy, at the very least, that you would have out there in those NASCAR type packages. Ethan Burke is capable as a pass rusher. I wouldn't say he's an elite level pass rusher, especially on like third downs. You want a little bit more speed out there. Vasek brings that speed, and he's still got the size. So at the very least, he would be a pass rush guy as far as being a specialist that's in there on second and long or third downs where it's a passing situation. Later in the game, when you have a lead, you bring in some of those pass rush specialists that haven't been playing the whole game and have a little bit more, fuel in the tank. So he'd be a pivotal part for this defense, and especially in continuing what was, I would say, the best pass rush team we've seen, at least since maybe one of those Charlie Strong teams that did have a pretty decent defense, if not well before that.
Right. Completely agree, Jake. Speaking of pass rushers and defensive linemen, 5 Longhorns accept Senior Bowl invites with the likes of Baron Sorrell, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Andrew Makuba, and Gunnar Helm. 4 of those being on the defensive side of the ball. Also 4 of those being part of the 2020 recruiting class. The only exception on that 5-player list that I just named is Andrew Makuba, who obviously transferred in from Clemson. But Jake, that defensive line, getting more invites to the Senior Bowl, just like we saw a season ago with Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat. And so, yeah, the Senior Bowl has become actually a spectacle that I like to keep up with and watch highlights of, and even try to see some of the scrimmage if I can.
Yeah, the practices even. I mean, that's something I'm tracking. Last year, I stepped out of the kind of draft coverage as much last year because I was so broken. This year, I'm finally ready to at least get excited for the draft
Right.
again. Look at all the prospects, get really involved in keeping track of the Senior Bowl. And like you said, everyone was going at the end of last year, how is Texas going to replace these two defensive linemen? Well, with two guys that are just gotten Senior Bowl invites and will be drafted. Now that streak may end next year unless they can get some of these transfers there. But as far as like guys recruited to Texas, that streak probably does end next year. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to see some guys that Texas have recruited that will start to show flashes of high draft picks, whether that be in an Alex January, who I think definitely could take that role next year as a younger guy, or even a Justice Terry, who all reports seem to indicate that he's going to be very likely a first round type talent for Texas.
And who's to say the system and the player development on this coaching staff doesn't get a Cole Bavard or a Travis Shaw, one of these transfers that have come in the offseason, up to that level to at least get an invite to the Senior Bowl. Those are going to be the upperclassmen of the group.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about both those transfers. I think they're going pretty undervalued. I would rank both of them ahead of like a Bill Norton type.
Yeah.
And Bill Norton was pretty damn good for the defense this year. He was just look at the A&M game. He made his best plays in the biggest games of the season, down the latter half. In the playoffs, he played extremely well. And that's one thing I love about this staff. And I think you're going to see it when transfers come in. I think you're going to see it with guys where the light bulb starts to click that they've recruited and kind of built up, is watching a player improve tremendously throughout a football season in itself, not just year to year, but seeing improvement from week 1 to week 3 to week 5 and so on. I think that's something that shows up at pretty much every position for the Longhorns.
Of those 5 players, Jake, whose draft stock rises the most? Who's going to make the bigger impact? Who's going to impress NFL coaching staffs the most at that Senior Bowl?
At this one, I thought you're already asking me to predict next season from the Longhorns.
Out of these 5 players, the Vernon Broughton, Alfred Collins, Makuba, Gunnar Helm, and Baron Sorrell.
I think all of them could be risers on their draft stock. I think Baron Sorrell's a guy who's probably a little undervalued right now. As far as who's going to rise the most, I'll go Gunnar Helm. I think either of the defensive tackles could, but they seem to already be getting, I've seen them talked about quite a bit as being like, higher end looking guys. Gunnar Helm is just starting to really, I'm just now starting to see the conversation of this guy's a really good tight end and should be drafted, second, third round type tight end. Whereas all the way through the end of the season, it was like 4th, 5th round plus. I think he's going to rise a lot. I think the Senior Bowl can only help him. People are just starting to watch his film, because a lot of these scouts and a lot of the draft analysts in general, they don't watch every college football game. So they don't see these guys tape until the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Then they just watch all their games.
Right.
And as they're watching Gunnar Helm's tape, they're going, this guy's not only a really good receiving tight end, he's pretty good at blocking too. And he really turned a corner his final year. I think his draft stock's going to rise the most. But I think Broughton and Collins have a chance to maybe talk themselves into a, what is it? Day 1 is only round 1 now.
Yeah,
so day two type, early day 2 type pick.
See, I think Baron Sorrell has the most room to grow. I think he's got, I think where his draft stock probably is now compared to where it could be come draft day, whether that be through Senior Bowl, through Pro Day, NFL Combine. He has multiple opportunities here to get himself in front of NFL scouts, in front of NFL coaching staffs, and to get that training where he might be at a 6th, 5th round pick as of right now. I think he's got room to grow. to get into that day 2 range of a 3rd round pick, And so similar to what you were saying with Gunnar Helm, I think they're going to look at Baron Sorrell and they're going to say, this guy's size and his strength and his ability to possibly play a little bit of inside as well as playing on the outside and having a little bit of versatility within that defensive line. I think his skill set with his size is really going to translate very well in front of NFL scouts.
He's an every down edge.
Yeah.
Because he is a much better pass rusher than I would say his numbers indicate. Even they don't indicate a bad pass rusher. I just don't think they show how much he actually affects the quarterback. I think he opened things up for Colin Simmons. He opens things up for guys on the field because you do have to respect him, but he's also obviously very good against the run. And when you have that versatility at the edge position, that is very valuable to smart NFL teams who aren't just thinking about only pass rush. Because if you have a guy out there who's only a pass rush specialist and he's out there every down, it really starts to take away from that pass rush specialist. You need people in on early downs who can also play against the run, especially with how the NFL is kind of shifting. It's still a pass heavy league, but I think we're starting to see that the running game kind of leads the way for the passing game again. We're almost starting to see that shift, obviously, and we're seeing some teams that are run first, like the Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to the Super Bowl. I think everyone knows that, I think those defensive edges, those defensive tackles who specialize in stopping the run are going to start to see their value go up based on how the play in the NFL has kind of shifted over the last couple of years.
Well, and I think that also goes to say is there's not a plethora of quarterbacks like we saw in the last decade with a Drew Brees, a Phillip Rivers, a Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, all within the same league. Now, yeah, we've got some good quarterbacks, but a lot of those quarterbacks are also better run dual threat guys than the previous names I just mentioned, where they're just going to be airing it out 40, 50 times a game. That's no longer really the case anymore with your modern day quarterback. So I think the skill set, it's not that they're not as good as players. The skill set has shifted a little bit in the NFL to where you do need someone who's going to be a little bit more disciplined within that run stopping side of things.
That's a really good point on the running quarterbacks. And I don't say that to you often.
No, you don't.
But it changes the way you rush the quarterback because it comes much more about, as we saw Texas when they played against a Marcel Reed, when they played against a Clay Cup, it changes the way you rush the passer in the sense of you're trying to make sure you're still covering running lanes and kind of corralling the quarterback or pushing him to which, in the case of Marcel Reed, where they said, we want you to roll out to the right. And we'll have a spy to follow you because when you roll out to the right, your completion percentage drops.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is going to show up much more in the NFL game, like you said, because you're starting to see Jaden Daniels come in and all these, in the playoffs, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, they're all running the football. And so it really changes the way you have to rush the passer. And I think today's college game just translates to the pros so much better. Yeah. And so some of these guys who are highly productive, but don't necessarily have some of the traits, I think those traits still matter, but matter less when you're looking at a Baron Sorrell, who I think still has some of the traits, but you look at that versatility as a player, that versatility is within his position. I think that translates really well to the pro game. Whereas 10 years ago, college and pro were like watching two completely different sports.
Right.
And I think it's much similar now.
And because you would get players who were so successful in college and their games didn't translate at all to the NFL game. And you'd get Heisman caliber guys. I'm talking about a Torrey Smith at Ohio State who wasn't drafted until the 7th round. The traits just did not align whatsoever. We're not seeing that nearly as much in today's college game. And that also goes to show too, and I know we're kind of getting a little off base of what we wanted to talk about today, but it's also going into, you've got coordinators going from NFL to college, from college to the NFL, and you're getting these coaches that have been in both sides of things, and they're developing the same skill sets, except they're at one level or another, like a Steve Sarkisian, a Chip Kelly, so on and so forth.
And sometimes when these guys go to college and then go to pros and back to college,
Lane
their
Kiffin.
ability as a Steve Sarkisian, their ability as a play caller, as a coach, or as a defensive coordinator goes up a lot.
Right.
And so it's kind of translating back and forth between each other now, where it didn't do that, just a decade ago. And that also brings up, and I just added it to our offseason topic list, so I'll tease it way ahead of time before we do this, is the fact that when I see today's NFL game, it bums me out to think, man, Vince Young played in the wrong era.
Yeah.
Well, that's an off-season talking point, because I
Yeah.
think we could do half a show on that. But I can't help but say it when it comes to my mind when I think about Jaden Daniels. Would he has been as good in the NFL 20 years ago? And that's no shot at Jaden Daniels, who's been excellent this season, was
It's more
incredible
so-
in college. It's that the NFL has finally realized that some of these schemes that colleges run for years
Work.
really do work still at the pro level. There was almost this elitist bias in way of thinking of how to play the game in the NFL that's now kind of being broken down. And I think it went to one extreme where the NFL was just mirrored college a few years ago. And now we're starting to see a mix of the two come together with creative run games kind of starting to lead the way for a lot of really good NFL teams, especially in the NFC. Well, I think the AFC kind of still has that college type environment. Part of that's because of the QB play. But it's just an interesting topic that I think we can do a whole episode on this summer and talk about how these plays and how the play in the NFL has changed, and think about players that 20 years ago, now if they got a shot to be pro, would probably be more successful. Obviously, for us being Texas fans, Vince Young leading the way in that conversation.
Well, and you could even, I know Colt McCoy had a 10, 11, 12-year career in the NFL as a backup, but would his career have been more successful? With his play style? People forget the dude was a scrambling quarterback and had the ability to run in college. I mean, he had a ton of big runs at the college level. Now, that also went to injuries suffered very early on his rookie second year in the league, and getting hit in the head, and James Harrison almost murdering him on the
Can't do
court
that
or on the
anymore.
field. And you can't do that. And you can't do that anymore. So is he protected a little bit better, in today's game? So anyway, but I do like that conversation piece. Jake, let's go ahead. Let's flip the topic. I have no easy segue other than just to hard stop, go into women's basketball. Great game over the weekend following the men's 22-point comeback that we had an immediate reaction to on Saturday. If you haven't watched it, please go back and watch that episode. On Sunday, women's basketball beat Ole Miss on the road 61-58, a little bit closer than maybe what the experts may have predicted, but a win is a win. Madison Booker seals the game with a basket with about 13 seconds left. She had a double-double with 12 points, 10 rebounds. Taylor Jones led the team in scoring with 24 points. Advanced to 6-1 in conference play, and they have Mizzou Thursday night, who is 0-6 in SEC play, and that is going to be the first, or that'll be the last kind of. Maybe you can not let the gas off, because obviously you don't want to have an easy let-up game. But this is a game where you should be able to take care of business. Everyone on your depth chart and everyone on the roster should at least get a couple of minutes in and play, and you should be able to rest some starters at the end of the second half to get ready for the big stretch of games you've got coming up.
Yeah. I mean, this might have been the ugliest win of the year for the women. In women's basketball, a lot of the time, and especially, even for this Lady Longhorns team, when you're the fairly heavy favorite, it ends up being some ugly, crazy blowout score. And in this game, they led for about 2 minutes total, 2.5 minutes total of this game. Their largest lead was 3 points, which they won by. Ole Miss largest lead was 8 points. But again, this game kind of did show what I think the fatal weakness of this team will be if they go out in the tournament, or if or when they go out in the tournament, which is just shooting the basketball, especially from behind the 3-point arc. They shot 9% from three, 1 of 11. They don't take a ton of threes. They dominated points in the paint, doubling up Ole Miss. And that is where this ladies team is really good, is at attacking the offensive glass, getting second chance points and scoring loads of points in the paint. And that was able to kind of carry the way in this game. But if they are able to get hot with 3-point shooting, especially come tournament time, I don't think there's many teams in the country who can beat them. The problem is they have games where not only are they not hitting threes, but you're shooting 9% from 3 point. It's going to make it tough to beat teams, even teams that you should handle. But a win is a win.
Yep.
And they are coming off some blowout wins against really good teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if they show up in big fashion against Missouri, because I know Vic Schaefer wasn't thrilled with this game, as you can expect.
And anytime Vic Schaefer isn't thrilled with the way his team performed, they typically turn it around the very next game, and it gets ugly. So starting in February, Jake, it's going to be a crucial stretch for Texas down the home stretch of games going into March. You start with Texas A&M. Obviously, that's just a rivalry game. Texas A&M is 10-9. They're not a great team, but it's a rivalry game. So you start the month of February off at Texas A&M in College Station. Then you go number 23 Vanderbilt, number 2 South Carolina, number 12 Kentucky, number 7 LSU. Those are all top 5 teams within the conference, and you sit at number 3. South Carolina sitting at number 1, Vanderbilt number 5, Kentucky at number, I believe, is number 4 in the conference, and then LSU is number 2 in the conference. And so the conference is going to all come together. With these top 5 teams in this stretch of games for Texas could be in a very different spot. They probably will be at a completely different spot come the end of this stretch, whether it is higher or lower, but a crucial stretch nonetheless.
Yeah, and I think everyone's going to have that South Carolina game circled because that was their worst performance of the season. They lost by 17 in that game. Their only other loss this season was an overtime game at Notre Dame. And I know the players, Vic Schaefer, everyone was disappointed in their play in that game. So that's one where I'm going to make it a point to make sure I watch that game fully, just to kind of see how they respond from that loss earlier this season. And then other than that, they're going to probably be the favorite in those 3 other games. And that LSU game looms large, obviously.
Yeah,
that is
a big one. And that was
every
at
one
home.
Of these games is big, but especially those games at home, and obviously the LSU and South Carolina game being at home. I mean, that's your top 3 teams in the SEC right there, and they're going to play 2 of them over the next few games.
Vanderbilt also at home. So you host Vandy, number 23. You host South Carolina, number 2. You travel to Kentucky, number 12, and you host LSU, number 7. So, I mean, you've got a crucial stretch of games at home, and you've got to capitalize and win more than you lose.
Yeah, I mean, 3-1 should be the goal for this women's team.
For this women's team, 3-1.
That's how high the expectations are and how good of a team they are. That 3-1 is the goal through this tough of a stretch.
Now,
but you look at it.
If they play LSU tight and it's a close game and it's just 2 teams going at it, and LSU ends up, hitting a buzzer beater or ends up winning the game in the final minutes of the game, then you can live with it. You can move forward with your season knowing that you played them tough, knowing that they're probably a top 3-4 team in the country. But I know they're ranked number 7 right now, but that's the talent that they have. And so you can live knowing that you played them well going into the SEC tournament. But like you said, Jake, 3-1 is ultimately the standard.
Yeah, I mean, you have three games at home, but B, one of those is probably the one you expect to lose, if any of them in South Carolina. But, the environment was actually really good against Tennessee. Student section showed out. The crowd showed out. It was a really good environment. I only caught the second part of the second half of that game. But Vanderbilt, South Carolina, LSU, it should be rocking for all those games.
Here's my thing with college sports, especially college basketball. Come February, it's time to fully commit to basketball season. I mean, there's no more kind of like, well, I'm getting used to the new semester. I'm getting ready for my classes. I'm a new student here at Texas. And no, you should have your routine down. You should be going out and supporting basketball. You should be going out getting ready to support baseball, softball. Like, this is now, you're far enough into your spring semester to where, okay, student section needs to come alive. It's time to start pushing these teams to where they want to be.
Yeah, we're a few weeks removed from football now.
You're right.
That's the other caveat with basketball now is football goes so late.
Mm-hmm.
If your team goes really far, it takes the focus away from basketball a little bit.
Looked great in the last 5 minutes of that Texas A&M's men's game.
Yeah, the whole crowd came alive, and I am happy about that because the crowd did stick with it, even though the game was ugly. You didn't have a mass clearing, which was good because we've complained about the environment in some other games where it just was not good enough, regardless of how the team is looking and playing. Yeah. It did come alive for that A&M game, and was part of what drove this team forward. What I was able to do to help drive this team forward, what Moody Center was able to do to help drive this team forward.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode, Jake. Again, like, share, subscribe. We drop these episodes 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday at noon. We will give immediate reactions to some of these games as often as we possibly can. Is that South Carolina game, Jake? Is that a Sunday or is that a Thursday?
That is on the February the 9th.
I believe that's a
Sunday.
That's a Sunday.
Which works out good.
Yeah, maybe we adjust
Super Bowl Sunday.
Ooh, is that Super Bowl Sunday? In 2 weeks from now? Maybe.
Yeah, that should be.
Well, I was going to say we do an immediate reaction. That game is at 1, so we'll have plenty of time before the Super Bowl.
That is Super Bowl Sunday. Granted, I'm not watching the Super Bowl this year because I just can't. I'm not going to be happy. I'm just going to sit there and be miserable,
and be upset
the whole time watching it. I would rather
maybe we do an immediate reaction to that game, to the Texas South Carolina game, and we adjust our schedule a little bit. We'll do that from time to time. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, keep spreading the word, keep supporting the channel. We appreciate the love. We appreciate the support. Again, drop comments, drop likes. What do you want to hear? Ask us questions, and we will answer them on air. We'll do a mailbag episode if we get enough of those questions and that we can fill a 20-minute time slot with those. We definitely appreciate it. But this has been your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, and you can subscribe to us where all podcasts can be heard and watch us on YouTube. This is all brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.